the floor of the Great Hall. Let's bring in our political editor, Beth Rigby. Beth, just talk us through what to expect in the next few minutes.
Well, this is a huge ceremonial moment, of course, Jane, in which both Houses of Parliament have gathered in the Great Westminster Hall, an 11th century hall, and behind the guards on the wall behind which King Charles will speak, on the stained glass window, there is a window in that hall which is dedicated to the Queen Elizabeth II to mark her Diamond Jubilee. That was a decade ago, and that was the last time Parliament's gathered in this way, both houses, to mark that moment when she came to address both houses. It's extremely rare for a monarch to do this. She only did it 5 times in her 70-year reign, to give you a sense of the occasion. And King Charles, sorry, I have to get used to that. I know. King Charles will come to the Commons. What will happen is there will be a fanfare of music, the guards welcoming him with the trumpet salute, and I think it's going to be the music of the Household Cavalry. Both speakers of the House of Lords and the House of Commons will make short addresses, receive addresses, a humble address pledging loyalty to the monarch. They will be very short speeches. And then King Charles will come and he will make a speech to both Houses of Parliament, no doubt speaking about the Queen and her service, and then maybe talking a bit about his reign and what he would like to do. But it's a very ceremonial affair, as I said, and a real moment in, again, the handover of power.
Let's bring in at this point the historian Sir Anthony Salden. And Sir Anthony, we know that the new king has met his new prime minister. He's met some of his ministers. So there has already been that connection between the king and government. But this is going to be the first real connection between the king and Parliament, isn't it?
Everybody.
Yes, and that's all important. The monarch used to be all powerful when this magnificent Westminster Hall was put up. The monarch was all powerful, and Parliament was the lesser agent. Now that has changed. Parliament and the political process, the Prime Minister is powerful. The monarch has a subordinate position, obviously in a democracy, but this week, this event we're now seeing unfolding reminds us of the continuing importance of the monarchy in our national life, and it's bringing together all these diverse parties and elements within parties. Often it's clashes within parties that are more bitter and intense than between parties, and here they all are gathered together in front of us. It's a truly extraordinary, historic and a truly British occasion.
And just tell us, if you can, a little bit about the significance of the Great Hall. It was where lots of courts were held in the past, but of course it has become now the place where lying in state happens, and this will be where the Queen will eventually lie in state later in the week.
Yes, I mean, in many ways it is the most historic and the greatest building in our country. It dates back 1,000 years. It's seen Parliament, the great occasions of Parliament. It is the one space within Parliament where members of the House of Lords and House of Commons can gather. It's where the lying in state of great leaders like Winston Churchill or the monarchs take place. On the floor. There are metal indicators of where exactly the coffin lay for those lying in states. And it was part of Westminster Palace. Now that was where the great Tudor and Stuart monarchs lived. It was just going down into Whitehall. None of it's left apart from the banqueting house. It all burnt down, but it's a reminder of the buckle that joins together Parliament, and here we can see the great figures coming towards and dignifying. It's reminding us of what we hold and share together, what unifies the country. It is the monarchy.
And we're just looking as we speak, Sir Anthony, the Lords have processed in through the north door of Westminster Hall, and they are led by the Speaker of the House of Lords, Lord McFall, John McFall. He was a teacher, he was a Labour MP, and was Minister for Northern Ireland before he became Lord Speaker. But now in that role, he oversees the proceedings in the chamber.
Absolutely, very nice that he was a teacher, and the Speaker are again, they're not party political, they are there serving the interests of Parliament as a whole, the House of Lords and the House of Commons, so that's appropriate that they are speaking as the unifying forces, and of course the sovereignty of Parliament is made up of the House of Commons, the House of Lords, and the Crown. That's how our Constitution, unwritten largely though it is, that's how it works. And we're seeing it in the most visual and dramatic form. As looking at that picture there, one wonders, maybe this is patriotic pride, but why not? But it's also true, how many other countries on earth have a tradition, history like this? So much pageantry. So much style.
It is a most magnificent building, isn't it? And now we're seeing there the Speaker of the Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle. He is now coming in, leading the MPs, led by the principal doorkeeper, and the Sergeant-at-Arms there carrying the mace ahead of him.
Absolutely. A reminder of who is the dominant person and who presides over the House of Commons. It isn't the Prime Minister, it's not the leader of the opposition, it is the Speaker. That's the way the Constitution works. So they are presiding over this really extraordinary occasion. For years to come, we'll see images of this. Haven't seen them for 70 years.
We were just talking about how amazing this building is, and there was confusion, wasn't there, about how this building was actually built, because it was built in 1097, but the great theory is that at that time that there was no idea how carpenters could make roofs wider than the timbers available. So it is thought that possibly there were pillars holding up the roof at some point, but no evidence of that has ever been found, has it?
No. And what's that saying about building? Some of us who've had homes built find that the problems emerge after 5 or 10 years. Here, it's been going for 1,000 years, and that's a reminder of the great traditions of craftsmanship. They really do endure. The physical building has endured along with the traditions that go on with it, and it is what makes the country so special, that sense of the ongoing history that we're being reminded of here, the architecture, but also the traditions, and indeed the titles, these positions of speakers and the monarch.
And speaking of the monarch, he's coming here today. He's going to receive these speeches from both of the speakers and make his own response. But then he's travelling on to the Four Nations. Why is he doing this, and why is it important?
Well, it's of immense symbolic importance because the monarch presides over, rules over all the kingdoms, and holding the United Kingdom together is a primary responsibility of the monarch. The monarch speaks to all peoples and all countries, and to ensure that Northern Ireland and Wales, and of course Scotland, with reference to the lying in state today, feel very much not secondary but integral to the country alongside England, is very important. Moments like this will fix and be pinned in people's memories for years to come. So the way that it's done, and the sense that all those nations are looked after and are important to the new monarch, as indeed they were to Queen Elizabeth, this matters. These are weighty moments of awe, days of awe.
And as we look at these images, looking over Clarence House, which is where we think the new king will be travelling from, down to the Great Hall in Westminster, let's rejoin our political editor, Beth Rigby. And Beth, while this is all happening, all of these ceremonial events and the king travelling around the country, what's happening to the business of government?
Well, in terms of the business of government, Parliament is now not sitting during the official morning period, so MPs will not sit until after the Queen's funeral on Monday, the 19th of September.
We could just see the king leaving Clarence House now.
And the King Charles III leaving Clarence House, he will come here also with the Queen Consort Camilla. But in terms of the business of government, yes, Parliament is not sitting yet.
Listening to the crowds there on the Mall. A lot of people gathered. These roads, I imagine, will be absolutely packed out when we come up to the funeral itself, won't they?
Yeah, they're talking about 20-hour waits, 250,000 people come into London to see the Queen lie in state. She will be lying in state from Wednesday in Westminster Hall. I was actually down on the Mall yesterday, and Jane, it was absolutely packed. It was a 3-hour wait just to walk past the front of the palace, and of course all those floral tributes, the air scented with blooms. It was really genuinely lovely in Green Park, but the lying in wait, that you will be able to go for 24 hours a day for 4 days. Parliament in Westminster Hall, people will be able to pay their respects to Queen Elizabeth II. It will be an extremely, extremely busy time in London. An estimated 750,000 people would like to make that trip.
And Sir Anthony, perhaps we could bring you back in, just because we're looking at these images of the king passing by. We know that when the Queen lies in state here down in Westminster Hall, but also up at St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh, family members are going to stand at all four corners of the coffin for a period, aren't they, to in tribute and to mark her passing. Will the king be taking part in that down here in London, do we know?
Well, we know that he did when his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, Queen Mother, lay in state. The four grandchildren were there as guard of honour. So we know that he's obviously going to be paying his respects. So, and that's a very important rite of passage. We're seeing enacted here events that have been planned for many, many years, but are now coming real and unfolding. So it's important for him. He is going to be burying his mother, and that will be at the very front of his mind as he comes forward now and makes this very, very important speech.
Indeed, we're just watching the King's car travelling just down past Horse Guards, now travelling down towards Parliament Square, and then from there into the House of Parliament. See the outriders there. Do you want to come back in, Sir Anthony?
Well, I was just going to say that it's in no way to diminish the importance of the Prime Minister or Liz Truss, of course not. But we were seeing there that when she walked in a few moments ago and took her seat, she was a special member of that party there in Westminster Hall, but not that special. The key people are those uniting forces of the Speaker of the Commons and the Lords, and now obviously the head of state. The words are important here. The Prime Minister is just head of the government. It is His Majesty's government, and here is the head of state. Very few countries have hereditary heads of state left in the world. There were 100 when Queen Elizabeth came to the throne. They're now less than 25 outside the Commonwealth. And this is a living head of state. Those that are left can be dictatorships or meaningless monarchies. Here we have a very real monarchy. We can see this. All the ceremony shows that the monarchy is a living part of the constitution, and it's underpinning democracy. It's not trying to overrule democracy or take anything away from it. It's supportive of democracy. So that's that's ironic to have a hereditary monarch underpinning democracy, and that's a uniquely British fix. Just in that party there, we see Edward Young, Her Majesty's private secretary, and he will now, in time, he will blend away, and a new private secretary who's been with the Prince of Wales. That's just underlying the people there who've been planning all these events, and they're important behind the scenes. We often don't know their names. What a moment this is. Thought about for many, many years, and there is Camilla, the Queen Consort, taking her position.
Your Majesty, I welcome you and Her Majesty the Queen Consort to Parliament today on this solemn occasion. Her late Majesty, our treasured Queen, and your beloved and deeply missed mother came here to Westminster Hall many times to receive the congratulations of her loyal subjects in the two Houses of Parliament and to celebrate with them historic landmarks and her long life of dedicated public service. She was both a leader to and a servant of her people. Her humility and integrity commanded the respect and captured the imagination of peoples and nations across the globe. Her late Majesty's joyous, unstinting and reassuring presence across the years made it difficult to contemplate that her long and inspiring reign of deep and unparalleled devotion would ever end. We and the nation closed our eyes to this inevitability, but it has ended. Only a few months after we celebrated Her late Majesty's historic Platinum Jubilee. And as you said so movingly, Your Majesty, in your address to the nation, we all now feel a sense of loss beyond measure. Nevertheless, the qualities that Her late Majesty embodied with such constancy remain to inspire you, Your Majesty, your family, and all your subjects. We remember her commitment, her kindness, her humour, her courage and her fortitude, as well as the deep faith which was the anchor in her life. Your Majesty, this is a historic space. Its walls built more than 900 years ago by William Rufus, and the magnificent hammer beam roof above us, commissioned 300 years later by Richard II. Since medieval times, much of our national story has taken place within these very walls, from civic gatherings to coronation banquets to the centuries during which this hall was at the heart of our legal system. But this ancient hall is a living space, and like our great nation, it continues to evolve. In 2012, Her late Majesty came to Westminster Hall to mark her Diamond Jubilee, and we saw the unveiling of the splendid memorial window, commissioned by both members of Parliament's houses, which now graces the north wall of this historic space. And now, for 10 years, the light from that window has added beauty to the grey stones of this place, bathing them in colour and reminding hundreds, nay, thousands, millions of visitors to the Palace of Westminster of Her late Majesty's dedicated life of service. Like the light that shines through this memorial window, Her late Majesty's magnificent achievements will live on by permanently illuminating and enriching our lives and our national discourse. Your Majesty, even as we mourn the loss of our dear Queen, we and future generations will draw strength from her shining example. Your Majesty, on behalf of all the members of the House of Lords, I pledge my loyalty to you and wish you and Her Majesty, the Queen Consort, well in the life of service to which you have dedicated yourself. We are proud and indeed humbled to welcome you as our King, and we look forward to welcoming you on many more occasions to Parliament and to this hall in the years ahead. Finally, Your Majesty, the House has commissioned me to deliver the following humble address, which their Lordships agreed on the 10th of September. I shall now read the address. Most gracious Sovereign, we, Your Majesty's most dutiful and loyal subjects, the Lords spiritual and temporal in Parliament assembled, beg to leave to convey to Your Majesty the deep sympathy felt by this House in the grief Your Majesty has sustained by the death of our late beloved Queen, Your Majesty's mother of blessed and glorious memory. To extend to all the royal family the deep sympathy of this House in their grief, which is shared by all members. To assure Your Majesty that the example of selfless public service, which our late Sovereign displayed over her reign of 70 years, her untiring endeavours for the welfare of her peoples, and her fortitude in adversity will ever be held in reverent, affectionate, and grateful remembrance. And to express to Your Majesty our loyalty to Your Majesty's royal person and our firm conviction that under the blessing of divine providence, Your Majesty will, throughout your reign, further the happiness and protect the liberties of all your peoples in all your realms.
Shout out. Thanks for coming. Thank you, guys.
Your Majesty, let me repeat a welcome to you and to Her Majesty, the Queen Consorts, on this solemn occasion, members of both Houses of Parliament gather here to express our deep sympathy for the loss we have all sustained in the death of our Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth. We have seen that this is a loss that is felt around the world. It is a loss to the United Kingdom, the overseas territories, the Crown dependencies, and many countries over which she reigned. It is a loss to the entire Commonwealth, which she did so much to nurture. It is a loss to all of us, but we know, most of all, it is a loss to you, Your Majesty, and to the royal family. Newspapers have been filled with photographs of Her late Majesty since the news broke. The most touching have been the glimpses into the family life which we usually kept sheltered from public view. Deep as our grief is, we know yours is deeper. We offer our heartfelt sympathy to you and all the royal family. We know that there is nothing we can say in the praise of our late Queen, your mother, that you will not already know. Over the past days, members of the House have spoken of their encounters with Queen Elizabeth. They have spoken of her sense of duty, her wisdom, her kindness, her humour, how she touched the lives of hundreds of thousands of their constituents in her visits to every part of this country. Their words have been heartfelt. She sat in this historic hall, as you sit now, on many occasions. Some of those occasions were to celebrate milestones in her own reign. The addresses to celebrate her silver, golden, and diamond jubilees shared a common thread, that our constitutional monarchy is a symbol of stability in an ever-changing world. As Speaker Boothroyd said, Queen Elizabeth's wisdom and grace demonstrated for all to see the value of a constitutional monarchy in securing the liberties of our citizens and the fundamental unity of this kingdom and the Commonwealth. On other occasions, our late Queen was here to mark the historic moments, such as the 50th anniversary of the Second World War, a war in which she herself served in the armed forces. And in 1988, we celebrated the 300th anniversary of the revolutions of 1688 to 1689. It is perhaps very British to celebrate revolutions by presenting an address to Her Majesty. But those revolutions led to our constitutional freedoms, set out the foundation for a stable monarchy which protects liberty. In your first address to the nation, you recognised your life would change as a result of the new responsibilities. You pledge yourself to uphold constitutional principles at the heart of our nation. These are weighty responsibilities, as the early Queen Elizabeth said in her final speech to parliamentarians. To be a king and wear a crown is a thing more glorious to them that see it than it is pleasant that them that bear it. We know you hold the greatest respect, the precious traditions, the freedoms and responsibilities of our unique history and our system of parliamentary government. We know that you will bear those responsibilities which fall to you with the fortitude, dignity demonstrated by Her late Majesty. When the House met at the Accession Council, my first symbolic act was to make the oath to be faithful and bear true allegiance to Your Majesty, King Charles. And so it is my duty to present our humble address to you, our new King, to express both our sorrow and loss of our Sovereign Lady and our confidence in the future in your reign. Most gracious Sovereign, we, Your Majesty's dutiful, loyal subjects, the Commons of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, in Parliament assembled, express deep sympathy felt by this House for the great sorrow which Your Majesty has sustained by the death of the late Queen, Your Majesty's mother. Extended to all the royal family the deep sympathy of this House in their grief, which is shared by all its members. Assure Your Majesty that Her late Majesty's unstinting dedication over a reign of over 70 years to the service of our great country and its people, and to the service of the countries and the peoples of the rest of the wider Commonwealth, which will always be held affectionate and grateful remembrance. And to express to Your Majesty our loyalty to you and our conviction that you will strive to uphold the liberties and to promote the happiness of the people in all your realms, now and in years to come.
Shout out, everybody.
My Lords and members of the House of Commons, I am deeply grateful for the addresses of condolence by the House of Lords and the House of Commons, which so touchingly encompass what our late sovereign, my beloved mother, the Queen, meant to us all. As Shakespeare says of the earlier Queen Elizabeth, she was a pattern to all princes living. As I stand before you today, I cannot help but feel the weight of history which surrounds us and which reminds us of the vital parliamentary traditions to which members of both houses dedicate yourselves with such personal commitment for the betterment of us all. Parliament is the living and breathing instrument of our democracy. That your traditions are ancient, we see in the construction of this great hall, and the reminders of medieval predecessors of the office to which I have been called, and the tangible connections to my darling late mother we see all around us, from the fountain in New Palace Yard, which commemorates the late Queen's Silver Jubilee, to the sundial in Old Palace Yard for the Golden Jubilee, the magnificent stained glass window before me for the Diamond Jubilee, and so poignantly and yet to be formally unveiled, your most generous gift to Her late Majesty to mark the unprecedented Platinum Jubilee, which we celebrated only 3 months ago with such joyful hearts. The great bell of Big Ben, one of the most powerful symbols of our nation throughout the world, and housed within the Elizabeth Tower, also named for my mother's Diamond Jubilee, will mark the passage of the late Queen's progress from Buckingham Palace to this Parliament on Wednesday. My Lords and members of the House of Commons, we gather today in remembrance of the remarkable span of the Queen's dedicated service to her nations and peoples. While very young, Her late Majesty pledged herself to serve her country and her people, and to maintain the precious principles of constitutional government which lie at the heart of our nation. This vow she kept with unsurpassed devotion. She set an example of selfless duty, which, with God's help and your counsels, I am resolved faithfully to follow.
Shout out Emorx and everybody. Angels. Junalyn, Rosalind, Leah, Via, Admin Via, Brent and Fela, and everyone.
King's bodyguard. King's bodyguard. Shut up.
Leslie, Junalyn. Thanks so much everybody for coming over and your support. Rosalind, Leslie, Junalyn, Admin Bia, Emworks, Brent and Phila, Leslie, sino pa yun? Annie. And all viewers, mega love shoutout sa inyong lahat. Bilis lang.
Well, a few words from the King to the assembled Lords and MPs in person as he leaves Westminster Great Hall. He will now travel on to Edinburgh by air to be with his mother's coffin in Edinburgh. We've just heard an address from both Houses of Parliament to the King. Lord McFall, speaking for the Lords, talked about the Queen's qualities, her commitment, kindness, humour, fortitude and deep faith that was an anchor in her life, and how they are proud and humbled to welcome Charles as their new King. Sir Lindsay Hoyle, speaking for MPs, talked about how the constitutional monarchy is a symbol of stability in an ever-changing world. And the King, in his response to both houses, talked about how the Queen had pledged to maintain principles of constitutional government, a promise he said that she kept with unsurpassed devotion and selfless duty, and that he is resolved faithfully to follow that. Let's just bring in our political editor, Beth Rigby, who's with me now. Quite a moment in Westminster Hall there, Beth.
It really was a moment, and I have to say, another absolutely pitch-perfect speech there by King Charles. You remember in his address to the nation the other day, he quoted Shakespeare. He said, "May flights of angels see thee to thine rest," about his late mother. And then in the Westminster Hall there, he again quoted Shakespeare, this time referring to Elizabeth I, where he said she was a pattern to all princes living, and that really was the metaphor of the speech to both Houses of Parliament, that he would try to honour his mother's manner in which she reigned. It was a speech in which he expressed his gratitude for the condolences passed, as you said so succinctly, from both speakers of the House of Lords and the Houses of Parliament. And then he talked again about Westminster Hall, that 11th century hall that through the ages has seen many a king and queen come and go, and been the occasion, the place for big moments in national history. He talked about it being a living embodiment of our democracy, with traditions ancient in that great hall. And he talked about, as you said, upholding the constitutional traditions by which the relationship between Parliament and the monarch rests. And then he ended it again by thanking parliamentarians for their respects to his late mother, and referencing the symbols around the House of Parliament that have marked her long reign, from the fountain in New Palace Yard, which is where the cars drove in to represent her silver jubilee, to the sundial, which represents golden jubilee, and then of course the diamond jubilee window, which you saw there, and which long before the Speaker of the House of Lords spoke about the light and the colour that brought into that very grey Westminster Hall. So again, another constitutional moment in there, with King Charles III accompanied by the Queen Consort, accepting the humble addresses of both Houses of Parliament, condolences passed, and he in return spoke to both Houses of Parliament. He now leaves and he makes that journey up to Edinburgh for another event there, where there will be a service this afternoon.
Yeah, and it was just on Friday, of course, that the Prince Charles returned from Edinburgh. He flew into RAF Northolt in West London, and that is where he is heading right now. He will return there, and he will make a journey by plane up to Edinburgh, and then, along with his siblings, accompany his mother's coffin. He will visit the Palace of Holyrood House, will inspect the Guard of Honour, and then there will be the ceremony of the keys on the forecourt of the Palace of Holyrood House. And you can see making very slow progress there up the Mall. There are quite a few people on the Mall, but the flags does just look spectacular in the bright sunshine.
I will continue later on. Thank you. Thanks for the support.
Let's bring in our constitutional historian, Sir Anthony Selden, who was watching that ceremony as well. And Anthony, I imagine your ears were pricking up when Sir Lindsay Hoyle talked about the constitutional monarchy being the symbol of stability in an ever-changing world.
Well, he's right, isn't he? I mean, that's what it is. And that stability is all the more important at a time in the world where many democracies are under threat, not least sometimes from democratically elected leaders, and that sense of continuity. I mean, it was just stunning, that, wasn't it? The spectacle that in that building, the most historic room in the country, going back, as we were hearing, all the way back to the 11th century, then remodelled, It's where the first Parliament
Alright,
met in
continue later. Thanks for
1265.
coming, everybody.
Very
Love you.
fortunately,
Bye-bye.
it
Take care.
escaped being burnt down with the
bless.
rest of Parliament in 1834. So there you have the history of Parliament
Tracy,
and the
everybody,
history
bye-bye.
of the monarchy embracing each other with those two very dignified speeches by the speakers, reminding the country of the importance of the role of the Speaker and of Parliament, both incidentally Labour. We have a Conservative government, but they're both, were once, before they became
Punta ng
unpartisan
King,
speakers, they were
mag-join sa
Labour
mama niya, sa mama.
MPs. So that's saying something about the country.
Sa
And
Edinburgh.
then the
Thank you,
speech from
bye,
Charles,
guys.
Beth mentioned Shakespeare. I think that's very important. Shakespeare, the Royal Shakespeare Company, that sense of history and culture and the arts have been key themes of Prince Charles when he was Prince Charles. And there he is twice now referring to Shakespeare, and quite, if you like, an understated speech. He was pitch perfect, extraordinarily correct, thanking Parliament, honouring his mother, the Queen, and reminding everyone about his job, not to lead the country in a direction that he wants, but to underpin and support those with the democratic responsibility for taking Britain forward throughout the 21st century. So very finely judged, I think.
Bye.
And so he's made 3 significant speeches now, hasn't he?